You see my screen?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
So
Nirmal.
we are. Uncle, can you just mute yourself because there is a lot of background noise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we are continuing from Mark chapter 14, verse 32. We enter into the agony of Jesus. And what we see here is Jesus versus
Jesus
disciples.
versus
You see Jesus versus
Jesus versus.
disciples. Jesus being faithful to his Father and the disciples being unfaithful. So Gethsemane, the word Gethsemane means olive press. So Jesus comes to this place because this is somewhere he's been frequenting. And he went to a place which is called Gethsemane and he said to his disciples, "Sit here while I pray." So all the disciples are there and he makes them sit down, and he took with him Peter and James and John and began to be greatly distressed and troubled. And he said to them, "My soul is very sorrowful even to death. Remain here and watch." And going a little farther, he fell on the ground and prayed that if it were possible, the hour might pass from him. So now we see three different groups now, three different stages. You have the disciples who are sitting in a place, and then a little further we have Peter, James, and John, and then finally we have Jesus who is sitting all alone. And he tells them, "My soul is very sorrowful even to death." And he is really troubled because he knows what is going to happen. Although Jesus prepared himself completely for the passion, he knew what was going to happen, he spoke about the cross, and yet when the time comes, like any other human being, he feels that pressure, that weight on himself. And so he says, "My soul is very sorrowful even to death." And he fell on the ground and prayed, you know, that if possible, the hour might pass from him. Imagine, you see, Jesus knowing that the Father has called him to go through this, in spite of that, he says, "If possible, let this go away from him," because this is going to be so heavy. That is what happens to all of us when we go through a moment of difficulty, a pain, temptation. No, we don't want that to be there. We want it to go away because by nature, human beings don't want to go through any endurance, through suffering, through pain, through difficulty. So, Jesus also, in his natural human self, he's praying that if possible, this time of suffering may go away from him. And he said, "Abba, Father, all things are possible to thee. Remove this cup from me." You see, till that point, you see how human Jesus is. But then he adds something so beautiful. He says, "Yet not what I will, but what thou wilt." That is what is so beautiful about Jesus. On the one hand, there is this pain, there is this agony, and there is this anguish within himself. And naturally, he wants this to go away. On the other hand, he says, "Father, I will go through this if you are willing. Let your will be done." So that is what really makes him go on, press on towards his goal. And he came and found them sleeping. And he said to Peter, "Simon, are you asleep? Could you not watch 1 hour? Watch and pray that you may not enter into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak." The same thing Jesus tells the disciples, remember, when he taught them the Our Father, "Lead us not into temptation." So the same words Jesus uses here, pray that you may not enter into temptation. Because deep down our spirits are willing to do God's will, but the flesh is weak. The flesh wants to run away from all that is uh, difficult. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. And again he went away and prayed, saying the same words. Again he says, Father, if it is possible, take this cup away. Yet not my will, but yours be done. And again he came and found them sleeping, for their eyes were very heavy, and they did not know what to answer him. And he came the third time and said to them, Are you still sleeping and taking your rest? It is enough, the hour has come. The Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Now you must understand the agony that Jesus is going through all alone. When you need someone and they are not around, and they are not willing to support you, the pain is even greater. And that is the kind of pain Jesus goes through all alone. He suffered alone. And the words that Mark uses in Greek is like, when you take a piece of glass and pound it and crush it, how does it become? That's how Jesus felt. He felt he was completely smashed and broken. That's the kind of feeling he went through when he was in this agony. So, verse 42, Rise, let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand. And immediately, while he was still speaking, Judas came, one of the 12, and with him a crowd with swords and clubs from the chief priests and the scribes and the elders. Now the betrayer had given them a sign, saying, The one I shall kiss is the man. Seize him and lead him away under guard. When he came, he went up to him at once and said, Master. And he kissed him. And they laid his hands on him and seized him. Now, this kissing the rabbi was a very common custom among the Jews.
The screen is not seen here.
But kissing the rabbi to show him away, to kind of betray him, is something terrible, isn't it? So he uses this kiss to identify who Jesus is for the others to arrest him. So Jesus, would be really sad when he sees Judas doing this, his disciple betraying him. And they laid hands on him and seized him. But one of those who stood by drew his sword and struck the slave of the high priest and cut off his ear. And Jesus said to them, Have you come out as against a robber with swords and clubs to capture me? Day after day I was with you in the temple teaching, and you did not seize me. But let the scriptures be fulfilled. And they all forsook him and fled. You see, again, Jesus is all alone. Everyone leaves him. When Jesus is arrested, they all run away. And a young man followed him with nothing but a linen cloth about his body, and they seized him. But he left the linen cloth and ran away naked. So we do not know who this man is. They think it is Mark, but we are not sure. So this boy runs away. So he is the last person left, and he also escapes. And so here is Jesus all alone, standing before all these people uh, as a criminal. See, they led Jesus to the high priest, and all the chief priests and the elders and the scribes were assembled. So here there is an unofficial meeting. So they are catching Jesus, they are talking to him, and they are conducting this session which is not official. See, they're doing it in the dark. So this itself is illegal, but they're doing it. And Peter had followed him at a distance. Now, you see, this is what is called a sandwich narrative. On the one hand, you have Jesus, who will be like what we see in Isaiah 53. He will be like the lamb led to the slaughter. He will not open his mouth. He will be completely dumb before the people who are there, like the lamb before his shearers is dumb. So will he be. On the other hand, we see Peter, who is going to deny Jesus 3 times. So this is being sandwiched. This is a sandwich narrative. So you have Jesus and you have Peter. Jesus, who is faithful to the Father, and Peter and the disciples who are unfaithful to their master. And Peter had followed him at a distance, right into the courtyard of the high priest. And he was sitting with the guards and warming himself at the fire. Now the chief priests and the whole council sought testimony against Jesus to put him to death, but they found none. For many bore false witness against him, and their witness did not agree. You see, you need two witnesses at least to testify to someone's wrong. You remember the story of Susanna in the book of Daniel, where two people come up as witnesses, two old men, and they bear false witness. So here also for Jesus, they are not able to get witnesses, and their witnesses will not tally. So therefore, they cannot take that as a serious witness. Some stood up and bore false witness against him, saying, we heard him say, I will destroy this temple that is made with hands, and in 3 days I will build another not made with hands. Even so, yet not even so did their testimony agree. And the high priest stood up in the midst and asked Jesus, have you no answer to make? What is it that these men testify against you? But he was silent and made no answer. Again the high priest asked him, are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed? And Jesus said, I am. And you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power and coming with the clouds of heaven. Now this is what we read in the book of Daniel also, that Son of Man will come with the clouds of heaven. So Jesus says, that is what I am. When he is asked that most important question, Jesus says, I am. The word I am refers to Yahweh. So when Jesus uses the name of God, he has blasphemed according to them. According to the Jewish law, Jesus has blasphemed because he has called himself God, the Son of God. And therefore the high priest tore his garments and said, why do we still need witnesses? You have heard his blasphemy. What is your decision? And they all condemned him as deserving death. So that was the Jewish law for blasphemy. When you blaspheme, you are killed. You are killed by stoning. So they all decide to do away with Jesus because he has blasphemed. Of course, this is not the reason why they've arrested him. They know what Jesus has done. They've seen his miracles. They've seen his preaching. They've seen his healings. They've seen how he has exorcised so many people. They are terribly jealous of him, and that is why they want to do away with him, because they think he'll bring about a great upheaval and they will all be out of work and business, and so they want to do away with him. And so somehow they get this opportunity now and call him a blasphemer. And some began to spit on him and to cover his face and to strike him, saying to him, prophesy. And the guards received him with blows. See what is happening to Jesus. And meanwhile, the story of Peter comes in. He's being sandwiched. And as Peter was below in the courtyard, one of the maids of the high priest came, and seeing Peter warming himself, she looked at him and said, you also were with the Nazarene Jesus. But he denied it, saying, I neither know nor understand what you mean. And he went out into the gateway. And the maid saw him and began again to say to the bystanders, this man is one of them. But he denied it. And after a little while, again the bystanders said to Peter, certainly you are one of them, for you are a Galilean. But he began to invoke a curse on himself and to swear, I do not know this man of whom you speak. You see, there is a gradual progression in what Peter is doing. You see, he denies Jesus little by little, and at the third time, he's kind of abusing himself. He's cursing himself, and he says, I'm swearing. The word swear is a very strong word. He says, I do not know the person you're talking about. Imagine, he's completely dissociated himself from Jesus. Just as Jesus had predicted, Peter does this. He says, I have nothing to do with this man, Jesus. 3 years of being with Jesus, experiencing his power, his presence. And now, when Jesus is arrested, Peter doesn't have the guts to say that he belongs to his party. He says, I don't know who Jesus is. And immediately the cock crowed a second time. Peter remembered how Jesus had said to him, before the cock crows twice, you will deny me 3 times. And he broke down and wept. So, this is the story of Peter's unfaithfulness, infidelity to the master, not being able to stand up for the master. So, Mark is writing this as a contrast to show us how we should not be like the disciples and how we should be like Jesus, who was willing to obey the Father, total obedience to the Father. And as soon as it was morning, the chief priests with the elders and scribes and the whole council held a consultation, and they bound Jesus and led him away and delivered him to Pilate. Now, see, there are two different places where Jesus is taken. One is the Jewish Sanhedrin, which is the highest court of law, like the Supreme Court, where it is a Jewish trial. And then there is an official trial by the Romans, because they were under the Romans and they had to go to the Romans in order to punish someone. They can decide for themselves petty issues, but this was concerning a person's life and death, so they have to go to the Roman governor. And so they bring him to Pilate. And Pilate asked him, are you the king of the Jews? And he answered him, you have said so. So Jesus answers him indirectly, saying, you are the one who says, I am the king of the Jews. Because this was the title that the people gave Jesus. And so Peter uses the same title to address Jesus, and he says, are you the king of the Jews? And the chief priests accused him of many things. So they all bring about different accusations, and Pilate is not interested in all that. And Pilate asked him again, have you no answer to make? See how many charges they bring against you. But Jesus made no further answer, so that Pilate wondered. At the feast, he used to release for them one prisoner for whom they asked. And among the rebels in prison who had committed murder in the insurrection, there was a man called Barabbas. This is so ironical that the word Bar Abba. So when you say Bar Abba, it means son of the father. That's the man's name. The criminal's name is son of the father. And who is along with him? Jesus, who is the son of the father. So you have here Barabbas, and this man Barabbas could be very, very dangerous for the Romans if he is released. And yet they have to release one of them, and Pilate is very sure that they'll ask for Jesus to be released, because Barabbas, everyone knows, is a criminal. But see what happens. The people are so adamant that they want Jesus to die that they don't mind Barabbas being set free. And the crowd came up and began to ask Pilate to do as he was wont to do for them. And he answered them, do you want me to release for you the king of the Jews? For he perceived that it was out of envy that the chief priests had delivered him up. So Pilate understands that Jesus is not really a criminal, but they're all envious of him. They're terribly jealous of him. That is why they have brought him here. But so he thinks somehow, okay, they will allow him to be set free, but it doesn't happen. The chief priests stirred up the crowd to have him release for them Barabbas instead. And Pilate asked them, again said to them, then what shall I do with the man whom you call the king of the Jews? So he doesn't know anything about Jesus. It is all what they say. So you say he is the king of the Jews. So what do we do with this man? And they cried out again, crucify him. And Pilate said to them, why? What evil has he done? But they shouted all the more, crucify him. So Pilate cannot understand. This man has not done anything that deserves death. Okay, he may have done something wrong, may have said something among the Jews, so it is your matter. But then I don't see anything seriously wrong with this man. He hasn't committed any serious crime. How can I, you know, arrest him and put him to death? No, he hasn't done anything evil. But they cry out, crucify him. You see, the people are so adamant, and therefore Pilate. Uh, Pilate's character is not revealed here, but they say Pilate was not so good as he is portrayed here. Okay, he was also a wicked man. That is what we understand from history. And Pilate quietly washes himself away. At the same time, he allows Jesus to be crucified. So that is what we see about Pilate. So Pilate, wishing to satisfy the crowd, released for them Barabbas, and having scourged Jesus, he delivered him to be crucified. So why the scourging? You see, the scourging is done only for a criminal, and when Pilate knew that Jesus had not done anything wrong, he still scourges him. The scourge, they have this whip which also has in it a piece of a bone or a metal piece. So when you strike the person with the whip, it's terribly painful. It brings out a piece of your flesh. So Jesus was scourged, and it takes him very close to death. When you have these 39 lashes, at the 40th lash, the person will die. So the 39th lash is when you're almost dead. You're as good as a worm. And the prophecy of Isaiah comes true, that his face was unrecognizable. He was looking like a worm. So all that comes true when Jesus is scourged. So he delivers Jesus to be crucified. And the soldiers led him away inside the palace, that is the praetorium, and they called together the whole battalion. So now Jesus is handed over to the Jews, and then he is handed over to the Roman soldiers, the guards who will take him for this crucifixion. Okay. So the Roman soldiers now do their part. They usually uh, do whatever they want, because the criminal anyway is going to die, and so they must lead him to his death, to wherever he has to go, and then they will crucify that person. So what do? They clothed him in a purple cloak, and plating a crown of thorns, they put it on him, and they began to salute him, "Hail, King of the Jews." Now the Romans don't know anything about Jesus, but because of what they heard, that he is called the King of the Jews, they make fun of him, they mock him, and they struck his head with a reed and spat upon him, and they knelt down in homage to him. And when they had mocked him, they stripped him of the purple cloak and put his own clothes on him, and they led him out to crucify him. Actually, I've seen this place. It's a very short distance. It's not that Jesus had to walk very far, but then this carrying this horizontal beam. Usually they carried only the horizontal beam. The vertical beam was there at the site of the resurrection, of the crucifixion. So the prisoner had to carry the cross beam, and it was very, very heavy. And in the weight of that, Jesus would fall. And since he had already been struck so much, he had already gone through so much of pain, he is struggling to carry this piece of wood. And they compelled a passer-by, Simon of Cyrene. Now, Cyrene is a part of Africa. Simon is probably a man who has been working there, or he has settled down there for many years. We don't know. He is coming from there, who was coming in from the country. That means he's coming from the fields. Whether he was working in the fields or he just went for a visit, we don't know. But what we do know is this, that he is the father of Alexander and Rufus. That means when Mark is writing this gospel, the sons of Simon are already famous men, Alexander and Rufus, important members of the Christian community. So, what we understand here is that when Simon had that brief encounter with Jesus, when he carried the horizontal beam for Jesus, in that short encounter, he really encountered God. And he went through a life changing experience, so much so his whole family converted. And his sons became important members of the Christian community. So you see how this short time completely transforms the life of Simon. So in this one sentence, Mark is telling us so much about the experience of Simon and how he is able to, follow Jesus along with his family. So they compelled a passerby, Simon of Cyrene, who was coming in from the country, the father of Alexander and Rufus, to carry his cross. And he brought him to the place called Golgotha, which means the place of a skull. And they offered him wine mingled with myrrh, but he did not take it. Why didn't Jesus take it? Because when you have this myrrh, it completely deadens your feelings. You don't feel any pain. So Jesus didn't want to go through that. He wanted to go through the pain. And so he refuses to take this myrrh mingled with wine. Sorry, wine mingled with myrrh. And he goes through this pain. And they crucified him and divided his garments among them, casting lots for them to decide what each should take. And it was the third hour. When you say third hour, that means you add 6 to it, it means 9 o'clock. Okay, third hour when they crucified him. And the inscription of the charge against him read, "The King of the Jews." Okay, so now it is 9 o'clock in the morning. So before 9 o'clock, all this has happened. Before the heat of the sun, they've already taken him to the place of crucifixion. Otherwise, it becomes very hot and it becomes very difficult. So, and when they had crucified him, and with him they crucified two robbers, one on his right and one on his left. And those who passed by derided him, wagging their heads and saying, "Aha, you who would destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself and come down from the cross." So also the chief priests mocked him to one another with the scribes, saying, "He saved others, he cannot save himself. Let the Christ, the Messiah, the King of Israel, come down now from the cross, that we may see and believe." Those who were crucified with him also reviled him. And when the 6th hour had come, 6th hour means 12 o'clock, noon, there was darkness over the whole land until the 9th hour, that is 3 o'clock, that is 3 p.m. And at 3 o'clock, at the 9th hour, Jesus cried with a loud voice, "Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani," which means, my God, why hast thou forsaken me?" Now, Jesus is reciting Psalm 22. Now, very often when we read this sentence, we immediately think that Jesus is complaining to his Father. But this is not just a complaint. Jesus is a person who had memorized the Psalms. He knew the Psalms in and out. And so he uses this Psalm, which is a wonderful Psalm, which finally shows that he puts his trust in the Lord. If you go back and read Psalm 22, you will find how, as the Psalm proceeds, the person who is saying this Psalm, King David, uh, will show his confidence in God. It's a very beautiful song. It's a beautiful psalm of confidence where the psalmist puts his trust in the Lord. Although he is going through tremendous pain now, tremendous suffering, a feeling of desolation, a feeling of being separated from God, it's only a passing feeling, because he knows after this he will be united with God forever. So Jesus uses this beautiful psalm. Although begins in a very negative way, where it says, "You have forsaken me, God, you have forsaken me, you have gone far away from me." And yet, that is a very human feeling, because that is what Jesus is going through now on the cross. He feels totally abandoned by the world, by his friends, by his Father. When you are in agony, you always suffer alone. But he says, this is not the end. This is not permanent. This is momentary. This is only passing. But I will once again be united with my Father. So that is the psalm. Whenever a Jew reads a psalm, you have to look at it in its totality, in its entirety, not just one line. Because what is the whole psalm saying? It's a psalm of confidence. And therefore, Jesus, even at the moment of death, is able to put his confidence in his Father. So that is what we need to understand. And some of the bystanders hearing it says, "Behold, he is calling Elijah." So they don't understand, no, because when he says Eloi, Eloi, they misunderstand. They don't know the scriptures very well. So Jesus is calling Elijah, they say. One ran and filling a sponge full of vinegar, put it on a reed and gave it to him to drink, saying, "Wait, let us see whether Elijah will come to take him down." And Jesus uttered a loud cry and breathed his last. So finally, when Jesus dies, he cries out, makes a loud noise, and he dies. And what happens the moment he dies? The curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. So something happens at the death of Jesus. A lot of things happen. There is darkness, there is thunder, and temple curtain is torn. Must have been very windy. So in that wind, the temple curtain is torn into two. And when the centurion saw, who stood facing him, saw that he thus breathed his last, he said, "Truly, this man was the Son of God." Now, who is this centurion? He is a Roman. And when Mark is writing this gospel, he puts it into the mouth of a Roman who says he, Jesus, is the Son of God. And so when he's writing this gospel to the Romans in Rome, the Romans who read this will know that, their own person, their own clan has testified to who Jesus is. And therefore, if you look at the Gospel of Mark, where throughout the Gospel we have this question, who is Jesus? Who is Jesus? All the time coming up, because he seems to be an ordinary man and suddenly he's so powerful. He's able to heal people. He's able to calm the storm. He's able to bring the dead back to life. Who is he? Who is he? And now that question is answered on the cross when their own Roman citizen, when he says he is the Son of God. See, so beautifully Mark brings it out. Of course, that is what the centurion said, but see how beautifully Mark portrays the whole thing to show that Jesus was the Son of God.
Mommy?
There were also women looking on from afar, among whom were Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James the younger and of Joseph, and Salome, who, when he was in Galilee, followed him and ministered to him, and also many other women who came up with him to Jerusalem. So there were a lot of people, there were a lot of women who were helping Jesus in his ministry. Now, all these people are not mentioned. You see, a lot of things are not mentioned to us, but what we understand is Jesus had a lot of following, and many of them were women, and they helped him, probably cooking for him, feeding him, and taking care of his needs. Somebody's talking. Can you please mute yourself?
Oh, sorry.
And when evening had come, so now Jesus is dead, and it is now evening because that's the end of the Sabbath. See, the Jewish Sabbath ends at 6 o'clock, and then the next day begins. So when evening had come, since it was the day of preparation, that is the day before the Sabbath, Sabbath is on Saturday, you see. So Friday evening, uh, Joseph of Arimathea, a respected member of the council who was also himself looking for the kingdom of God, took courage and went to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. So, you have to do all this before the Sabbath begins. You see, otherwise it becomes work. So before the Sabbath begins, Joseph of Arimathea goes to Pilate. He takes courage and he says, "Yes, I am going to ask for the body of Jesus." So, and he goes to Pilate and asks for his body, and Pilate wondered if he were already dead. How did this man die so soon? And summoning the centurion, he asked whether he was already dead. And when he learned from the centurion that he was dead, he granted the body to Joseph. And he bought a linen shroud, and taking him down, wrapped him in the linen shroud, and laid him in a tomb which had been hewn out of the rock. And he rolled a stone against the door of the tomb. So all this information Mark is giving us to show what they would normally do for a Jewish body. So they wrap him in a cloth and they put him inside a tomb which is hewn out of a rock, and the door is closed with a huge stone. See? So no smell can emanate from the dead body. So they close it with a nice stone. Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of Joseph, saw where he was laid. Because you need to know, no? We don't know the place. Normally, when you go to the cemetery, you kind of identify where somebody is buried. So, like that, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary, they see where his body is kept, so that they can come later after the Sabbath. They can come and visit the body and put spices and so on. Whatever was their custom, they will do. And when the Sabbath was past, Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James, and Salome bought spices so that they might go and anoint him. So this is after Saturday evening. So that means they're going probably on Sunday morning. Very early on the first day of the week. They went to the tomb when the sun had risen. So this is now Sunday morning. So they must have bought the spices on Saturday evening after the Sabbath, so that when they get up in the morning, first thing they can go to the tomb and put the spices. And they were saying to one another, "Who will roll away the stone for us from the door of the tomb?" So this is a problem, isn't it? So you need some strong person to help them. They're all women. They cannot open the tomb. They can't move the stone. It's a huge stone. So now they're thinking, who's going to open it for us? We need to get some help. So who will roll away the stone for us from the door of the tomb? And looking up, they saw that the stone was rolled back. It was very large. And entering the tomb, they saw a young man sitting on the right side, dressed in a white robe, and they were amazed. So they didn't expect all this. They go to the tomb wondering, first of all, who would open the door, push the stone, and then they find it's already rolled back, and there is a man sitting inside, and they were amazed. And he said to them, "Do not be amazed. You seek Jesus of Nazareth who was crucified. He has risen. He is not here. See the place where they laid him. But go, tell his disciples and Peter that he is going before you to Galilee. There you will see him as he told you." Imagine how they would have felt. Just imagine someone who's very close to you, your teacher, your friend, you respect somebody, and then you go to their tomb and then you find that their body is not there. Resurrection is not something they've seen before or heard before, never. So when they hear that Jesus is not there and he is risen, they're kind of filled with fear and they're terrified. So see what it says in verse 8. And they went out and fled from the tomb, for trembling and astonishment had come upon them. And they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. Try to understand the situation of these women. They go to the tomb, They go with such expectation to kind of, anoint him, and they find something totally different. That they see a being. It's not mentioned as angel, but it's most probably an angel, and telling them he's not here, he's risen. Go and tell Peter and the disciples that he's risen and he's going to meet you. They just cannot take in all this. It's too much for them. So they're filled with trembling and astonishment and fear. Trembling, astonishment, and fear. And because of that, they're not able to say anything to anyone. Speechless. Speechless, no? When you're filled with fear, you cannot open your mouth. So filled with fear. And that is the kind of experience they have now. Now, when he rose early on the first day of the week, Jesus appeared first to Mary Magdalene, from whom he had cast out seven demons. She went and told those who had been with him, as they mourned and wept. You see, now the story changes, from verse 16:8 to 16:9. You see, there is a total difference. Now, these women are running out of the tomb. Where do they go? They are supposed to go and meet Peter and the disciples in Galilee. So they have gone. But then suddenly this verse says, when Jesus rose early on the first day of the week. So Mark is suddenly introducing Jesus here. So when Jesus rose on the first day, he appeared to Mary Magdalene. She went and told those who had been with him, as they mourned and wept. But when they heard that he was alive and had been seen by her, they would not believe it. So you have now Mary Magdalene, you have these other women, and you have the disciples. Now Mary Magdalene goes to the disciples and she tells them, Jesus is risen. And they don't believe it. They say, no, 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 not possible. No, we've never heard of anything like this. Although Jesus predicted this, it doesn't dawn on them. So they are not able to believe that Jesus is risen. What is his resurrection? What is it all about? They don't know. So they cannot understand. After this, Jesus appeared in another form to two of them. See the two disciples on the road to Emmaus, as they were walking into the country. They went back and told the rest, but they did not believe them. So the disciples are getting different witnesses who have seen Jesus alive, and they would believe none of them. See, they're not willing to believe anybody's story unless they see Jesus themselves. We are blaming Thomas because Thomas said, unless I see, I will not believe. But what do we see here? We see the disciples being told again and again by different people that Jesus is alive, and they refuse to believe. How are they different from Thomas? They are no different from Thomas. See? Afterward, he appeared to the 11 themselves as they sat at table. And what does Jesus do? And he upbraided them for their unbelief and hardness of heart, because they had not believed those who saw him after he had risen. So you see what Jesus is telling them? He upbraided them. He was upset with them. Why? Because of their unbelief and hardness of heart, because they had not believed those who saw him after he had risen. So Jesus is saying, you fellows, you are so hard-hearted. You're not willing to believe the story of all these women and these men who came and told you that I am alive. So they are no different from Thomas. So Thomas is only a representative of the entire set of disciples. So all of them were in the same state. So we shouldn't just blame Thomas. All of them were like this because they were all disillusioned men. They thought that Jesus would become the Messiah in the way they understood. And when that did not happen, when Jesus went and died, they said the whole thing is over. And now to hear about this resurrection is something they cannot accept or understand because of their hardness of heart, because they were so closed to all that Jesus had said. Their minds were in a different plane altogether, as it were. And so they could not comprehend the plan of God. And he said to them, so in spite of all this, what is Jesus doing? He said to them, go into all the world and preach the gospel to the whole creation. So when we read this, what we understand is, it is not coming one after another. There is a long gap, but Mark is kind of putting important things one after another. We know that Jesus, after the resurrection, spent a long time with his disciples, and he continued to teach them and prepare them before he ascended to the Father. But Mark doesn't mention all that here. All that he's saying is, on the day of the resurrection, he comes and he scolds them and he says, you fellows are so hard hearted. Next minute, it's not the next minute. You see, it's the next verse, but it's not the next minute. Because between verse 14 and 15, there is a large time gap where Jesus has been visiting them, has been teaching them many things, has been explaining a lot of things. And after that, he said to them, go into all the world and preach the gospel to the whole creation. That means the gospel has to go everywhere. And when you say whole creation, it means all that is created by God. So not only human beings, everyone will receive the good news. So the good news is for the whole world, for the whole creation. That means everyone should experience God's divine life. And of course, gospel is preached only to human beings. So that is why he says, he who believes and is baptized will be saved. But he who does not believe will be condemned. It doesn't say he who is not baptized. It says he who does not believe will be condemned. Okay, and these signs will accompany those who believe. In my name they will cast out demons, they will speak in new tongues, they will pick up serpents, and if they drink any deadly thing, it will not hurt them. They will lay their hands on the sick and they will recover. Beautiful words, very powerful words. Because Jesus says, in my name you can do all this. You can heal people and you will not be hurt by any deadly thing. And when you lay your hands, sick people will recover. All these are things that Jesus bestows on his disciples. So then the Lord Jesus, after he had spoken to them, was taken up into heaven. So now we have the ascension of Jesus. So Jesus was taken up and sat down at the right hand of God. So Jesus has taken his rightful place next to the Father. And what happens here on earth? The disciples continue their work, and they went forth and preached everywhere, while the Lord worked with them and confirmed the message by the signs that attended it. Beautiful, no? So these disciples are preaching, and the Lord works with them, and he confirms all that they are saying. How? By the signs and wonders that he does. So while they are preaching, the Lord is working. So remember, even today, when you preach God's word, when you go and proclaim God's word, it is the Lord who is working in the people. It is not your words, because our words are not filled with power unless the Lord works with us. So when you take that initiative, that step to preach God's word, the Lord will work in those people, because he is the one who can touch the hearts of people. And along with that, what he will do, he will confirm all that is being said through the signs that accompany what you're saying. So when you say, if you believe in Jesus, you will experience his mercy, his love, his freedom. And as you say this, people will see signs in their lives, miracles in their lives, and they will understand that yes, this is truly the act of God. That is what happened. As the disciples kept preaching, as they kept going, the signs that followed were a testimony to the resurrected Lord, to the Lord who was truly risen and who was living among them. So beautifully Mark ends his gospel. So they went and preached, and the Lord worked with them and confirmed all that they said through the signs that followed their message. Amen. So, with this, we conclude the Gospel of Mark. Very short Gospel, but a very beautiful and powerful Gospel, full of action. Full of action. To see how Jesus went forth obeying the Father's will, and how he accomplishes the Father's will and brings about salvation. And now it is up to us to go out and share the good news to people who haven't heard about Jesus. And as we speak, the Lord will work with us, and He will show signs and wonders so that people may really know that it is Jesus who is working. So it is a call to each one of us to share the good news.